Tanya, Vanessa, Kwame, thank you so much for joining. This always kicks off Dragonfly's session every year at the MedTech conference. And this morning y'all had a fabulous 6th anniversary MedTech Color Breakfast. So what did that feel like, first of all, Vanessa? And what was the first one like?
Well, as the chair of the breakfast, I am just thrilled. I'm still on a high. Just looking at where we started with, 50 people in a very small conference room at the AvaMed conference to today, closing in on 400 attendees. It's just incredible. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience.
And you also got sniped at the end. You received the Champion Award. And Kwame kind of rolled you into that one. And I'm going to ask Kwame, what was the basis for that, and what was the idea behind that?
We really, as a board, took stock at the breadth and depth of Vanessa's contributions, and it was a unanimous decision. It really was probably a couple of years overdue, because Vanessa truly is a champion for the work she does, not only within MedTech Color, but with it outside, with McDermott, Will, and Emery's RISE program, and she's just all in. So the board was delighted to present that award, for sure.
Is that the very first Champions Award?
Yes.
So you have the inaugural Champions Award.
It was very humbling, a big surprise, and I'm very honored. Yeah. But it is incredibly meaningful to get that recognition from the people that I work with day in and day out, and especially from Kwame, who called me out of the blue 6 years ago and says, I have this idea. And I said, okay, I'm listening. So to think about sort of where we started and just the opportunity to play a role, it's really, really meaningful.
It's always dangerous when somebody calls you up and says, I have an idea. It's always dangerous. It's like, I'm listening, right?
Yeah. But my philosophy is always yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I raise my hand, especially when it's about something that's so integral and important to me and to so many others.
And you delivered an unbelievable keynote this morning.
Oh, thank you.
Unbelievable. So,
thank you.
So when you first got contacted to give that keynote, what were the first thoughts that went through your head?
I had two thoughts, actually. One, I was just incredibly honored and excited to join MedTech Color and to support in any way I could. I'll be honest, I was a little daunted as well. I mean, I thought hopefully I could make an impact like the prior speakers, but I was just really glad to be here and to join the team.
And your presentation was really interesting. I jotted down, I have a whole bunch of notes from this morning. But one that really stuck out was mentorship is important, especially with diverse backgrounds.
Yes.
And that diversity was strength to you, and you shared some great stories, Alvin Ailey dance, and your upbringing and your family composite.
Yeah.
And it was really powerful, at least it hit me and the people at our table. Tell me about that mentorship, because you revisited a few times with Vanessa as well in your conversation.
Well, mentorship is important really in any discipline for any ethnic background. I think for people of color coming up in industries where there's underrepresentation, it's not quite as easy to find those mentors, and I think that you really need to seek it out, and it helps to, one, give you guidance through the industry, but perhaps more importantly, again, going back to that concept of community and feeling like you belong, it gives you that sense of self-confidence that I think is just very important when you're feeling a little bit different from the majority in any setting.
And so, as people who are mentors, how can a mentor be proactive to solicit and make the community aware that they want to share in the development of all talent?
Part of it is events like these, where multiple people have an opportunity to talk and to make that clear. In fact, I've already had a few requests, which is really immensely flattering. But also it's, reaching out to talent when you see it in your organizations or even across your industry. If you see someone who is worth investing time and is from a diverse background, that's where you have to be very proactive, at least from my perspective, to help that person get to where they deserve to be.
Kwame, MedTech Color has so many initiatives going on right now, really important initiatives. And the pitch competition, I know you really expanded and added a lot of depth to it this year. So share that with the audience.
So we had been focused in the first 3 years on trying to really over-deliver on the top 10. We get about 100 applications, and we drill down to that top 10. But quite candidly, we're getting so much inbound from people who want to conduct workshops and master classes. We believe we have a capacity to serve more than just the top 10. So after some internal discussion, the board approved expanding the program to a top 25. So we can provide master classes, workshops, access to capital, and opportunities for non-dilutive and dilutive capital from organizations like the NSF and the NIH. And now most recently, we've added a track for pediatric devices. So, and really at the core is spreading the word through this networking breakfast. It is our culminating, congealing event where people get reminded of the good work we're doing. So that's why we're able to do it, because people come to us after the networking breakfast and say, how can I help? And a lot of times they can help with Pitch 365.
And so I always enjoy these events because they become a catalyst for the thought and the action. But what can we do post-event to remain engaged and help drive that initiative and support MedTech Color to make sure that there's enough depth and density, financing, and opportunities there?
So I'll start, and then Vanessa, I'm sure, has some thoughts on this as well. The good news is you get to choose from several great programs. From the actual pitch competition, we have partners like Wilson Sonsini that want to support for the actual event, to Pitch 365, organizations like TMG, they want to do a series of mentorings, and then collaborative community. Vanessa can talk all about those opportunities. And you just plug in where you want to. And some, quite candidly, want the connection between MedTech Color and their ERGs. So I just had a conversation with Philips. They're excited about continuing a conversation about how to connect our network of over 4,000 leaders of color to their ERG group, both in the US and nationally.
Vanessa, you mentioned also the collaborative community. So that's gotten even more inertia behind it this year. I noticed that you pointed out some new initiatives there.
Yeah, I'm very excited about it. We're very grateful to FDA for piloting the idea of having collaborative communities, and to Dr. Michelle Tarver, who is our FDA liaison and representative, along with Sharday Arojo, who heads minority health at FDA. And we're really excited in the collaborative because we bring together stakeholders across the MedTech ecosystem. So it's large strategic companies, we have CMS, we have NIH, we have government representatives sitting in the collaborative, we have patients, and we have healthcare providers. And we're all united by this purpose of making medical device development more representative and inclusive of the entire patient population, and getting more diverse patients as well as clinical investigators engaged in clinical research. So to that end, this year we have launched 4 brochures that are designed to help clinicians talk to patients about participating in medical device trials. And then we also have launched our Inspire portal on our website, where we curate rich data sets and databases from third-party organizations that are intended to be a resource and a destination for anybody who's looking for a diverse PI to serve in a clinical trial. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. We want to also, once we identify these individuals, we want to be a catalyst for providing them training, support, other things that they need to really be well positioned to participate in clinical research. So very proud of the work of the collaborative.
So why is it so important that we have diversity in PIs?
Well, there is, and one of the things that we tackle is the real problem of historic mistrust among historically underrepresented communities, Black, Hispanic, and others, with the pharma, the medical device industry, and with the concept of participating in research. There have been unfortunate abuses that have left lasting impacts on those communities. And so we at MedTech Color and in the collaborative community look at ourselves as being a part of the solution. We are talking to patients, we are engaging in focus groups, and what we're finding is if a patient's doctor is also a principal investigator or their hospital is a clinical trial site, then they are more likely to have those conversations with them about clinical research, and that's how we start to move the needle. But often the hospitals and clinical investigators who are working with those underrepresented patients are not top of mind for companies who are looking for clinical investigators. So we're going to find them and we're going to help get them trained up. And that way we hope to move towards solutions.
And then we'll be able to push that awareness towards the device companies that are looking to recruit and drive trials.
Absolutely, and we have medical device companies represented and working in the collaborative, so we really rely on them to tell us what are the credentials, where are the therapeutic areas of greatest need, what are the training gaps that we can help to fill. So it's really a very rich and expansive ecosystem.
So Tanya, I want to come back to your offer for mentoring, right?
You're going to get lots of calls.
Yes.
You know, at Edwards, you lead the compliance effort there. And there was a great conversation you and Vanessa had this morning about, and I'm not saying it, but that cop, right?
Oh,
right?
Yes,
and I saw you on the stage and just again. But I want to look at that because compliance and quality have gone from a cop mentality to an empowerment mentality in MedTech. And because you both brought that conversation out this morning, the companies that have the highest level of quality and compliance therefore get trust. And with trust, you can do a lot.
Right.
And in the past, I've been around MedTech for 32 years, quality and compliance were the stick that came out and not necessarily the tip of the spear that we're talking about trust here in a community.
Yeah.
So take me through your mindset when we think about compliance, these newbies that are coming into the compliance, or maybe they're mid-career. Mm-hmm. How should they view themselves as a catalyst and being part of that solution for MedTech?
Well, there was a lot there. First of all, I think the trust is actually key, as you say, and you want to generate trust externally with regulators and customers and patients. You can't have that trust if internally it's not generated even with your own compliance function. So I think that's one of the key, what I think is a key distinction between a good program and a bad program. I think for those coming into the industry, it's so important to continue to view yourself as a partner of the business and to always keep in mind what is the end goal for the company and what is the end goal for the compliance requirements that we are trying to implement and support. Because very often you can get caught in the weeds and lose sight of the very important work that both sides of the business are doing. So keeping your eye on the ultimate goal of the company and of the program really is probably the best advice I think I could give anyone in this field.
And so how does compliance stay on the correct side of doing the right thing in trust, yet continue to push the envelope? Because when you push the envelope, you create new opportunities. And that's a delicate dance.
Yeah.
And we can get to Alvin Ailey in a second. That's a delicate
no.
dance
Yeah.
for a leader in an organization like Edwards.
Yeah. You have to be strategic. Because yes, you push the envelope is maybe not the word I would use, but certainly you don't necessarily want to or need to be overly conservative in your decision making. So that's where, again, the partnership with the business is really critical, because without that knowledge of where the business is going and exactly what they're trying to accomplish, it's really impossible for a compliance professional to be able to evaluate where are the boundaries beyond which we shouldn't go. And so it's that ongoing dialogue, that ongoing discussion about strategy that really gets you to the right place. I feel very strongly about this, obviously, because I've been doing compliance now for quite some time, and there is a tendency to fall into process and rules and regulations and safety and conservatism to a certain extent, and that's not necessary. But it takes a little bit of additional effort on the part of the compliance team to really become integrated with the business and really understand where they're trying to go.
And so for all three, and this came up in your conversation this morning, the landscape of MedTech has changed. And we used to have just maybe our local state or a region or our country, if you're thinking about a device, but now we're a borderless business. And we've got social media, which is got no control limits on it, right? We've got digital, we've got privacy. Privacy, you said it this morning, not just of the patient, but of the employee. We've got centers of care changing now. So records are not only in hospitals anymore or doctors' offices, they're now in the free market owned by PE, right? And so you've got this landscape that is just a fire with opportunity, but also potentially liability. As an investor, FDA legal, compliance, when you look at that, Vanessa, what do you think about the next 5 to 10 years in that landscape?
I see two trends. One is that data, to your point, has now become an important commodity. And there are lots of rules and considerations around how we monetize patient data, how we share it, and how we access it. But I find that every stakeholder in the ecosystem, from manufacturers to healthcare providers, now view data as really the great equalizer and the huge value in product development. So that's one. The other one, I think, is the potential for digital health, AI, generative AI, to actually solve a lot of health equity issues in terms of access. When you think about it, we all have a smartphone, most people do, and if you look at the potential of putting technology in the hands of patients to help them better manage their care and be more involved and own their care, I think that will have a tremendous impact on closing some of the social determinants of health and the health equity gaps that we have. But a lot of laws. And therefore, I think people need to really have real conversations with their compliance partners and their legal partners about risk tolerance and what risks really drive the business forward and make sense to take.
And that's I'm glad you touched on that, because once you set a law down, it's really, they rarely get retrenched.
Yes.
They actually get deeper. And so we've got this new moment in time in healthcare in front of us. And we've got to be really careful on where we put laws right now, because it may suffocate unintentionally innovation.
Yeah.
Because we don't know what's coming 3, 5, 7 years from now. So it's really interesting there. And Kwame, as an investor, how do you look at this? You get to see so many different opportunities.
So fundamentally, I think the patient, customer, whatever term you want to use, and understanding how you're serving them and driving outcomes is timeless. And these bolt-on issues of AI, generative AI, data, security, all should be looked through the lens of how are we serving patients, driving outcomes, and quite candidly, how are we monetizing and driving value? So, the need for strong regulatory isn't going to go away. The need for strong reimbursements are going to go away. But the leader of the future, and I really listen closely to what Tanya was saying, has to think about how you manage risk and how you manage privacy. These are just new issues, but ultimately they have to be filtered through business fundamentals and making sure that the patient is still top of mind. Because that's our business still, fundamentally, patient top of mind.
Agreed. And we're going to stumble around for a while, aren't we? I mean, this is all a new landscape, the whole cyber and social, and what can we say, what can't we say, the new engagement with the caregivers and the providers. So as we stumble around, there's going to be mistakes made. But out of that, we always tend to come up with good ideas at the end of that. So it'll be interesting to watch. I want to finish off with something Julian Torda Hart said in the 70s. The availability of good medical care tends to vary inversely with the need for it and the population it serves. What does that say to you, Tanya? And what do we need to do about that in our community?
Well, I think that's one of the fundamental problems that we've been talking about here, and it suggests a bit of elitism in the profession, in the industry, and perhaps a lot of it might be self-conscious as well. But there just tends to be a gravitation towards the communities or the doctors or the people that are behind the device, the industry products. So I think what we need to do is exactly what what Kwame and Vanessa are trying to do. Let's try to diversify the representation in the industry from top to bottom. And I think that will really help to address that issue a little bit more directly. I think one of the problems that we've talked about this in the past or earlier today and in the breakfast as well, it's this trust issue, which I think is one of the biggest problems currently. So some of the imbalance is now driven by the ethnic groups rather than the other way around, because there has been so much reason to distrust. And so, like I said, I think that's the crux of the issue, and focusing on diversification efforts is really the key.
Vanessa, your thoughts on that?
What I'm inspired by is what we're seeing across the regulatory ecosystem is regulators like FDA really focusing on the voice of patient. And they have a voice of patient initiative where they are really talking to patients, a new patient advisory group. And so really incorporating the patient journey, the patient experience into how products get developed, I think is going to start to close some of these gaps that we see in care. And I think that industry is going to follow now that FDA is saying that we need to actively incorporate the voice of the patients in thinking about product safety and efficacy. And I'm hoping that then translates to the healthcare industry following suit to where we can get to a point where your zip code no longer determines the level of care you get or the access to care.
And for me, I think about somewhat non-traditional entrants into the ecosystem like Hafiza Muhammad and her solution born out of her own personal experience with her child. But now she's developing what soon will be prescription digital therapeutic for teens with a mental health crisis. And she's serving a population, the Medicaid population, that she has been able to demonstrate you can drive value and outcomes. So pouring into lifting up and shining a light on those companies that are treating these underserved populations will change that quote, hopefully for the better.
And then I'll leave it with this. Kwame, I mentioned it to you before we got on set today. I think patients that look like America really is what we should be aiming for across the board in the MedTech industry. And when you said that to me, I always have one takeaway from my MTC breakfast, and that was mine this year. So I want to thank all three of you for spending the time today. Tanya, Vanessa, Kwame, always good.
Always a pleasure.
Absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
I'm Joe Mullings from the MedTech Conference in Anaheim. Be well.